Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 29 of the Black and White Theology Podcast,
29.
coming to you live from Sellersville, Pennsylvania.
Are we going to do something for the big 3-0?
No. You want something for like every 5 podcasts.
Look, it's no different than a marriage, right? Can you imagine if your 25th came around and you did nothing? Steph would be all over you.
We did.
Now imagine
yeah.
when your 30th comes around. And you can say, oh, honey, the 25th, I took you to Darney Park. I mean, what do you want the 30th to be all about? You know you're going to do something big for the big 3-0. You know that.
All right. So I ask you, what are you doing for the 30th anniversary, 30th episode anniversary?
I was kind of thinking T-shirts, John. I was trying to,
No. I asked you what you're going to do.
No, it's what the podcast is going to do for us.
Oh, is that what it is?
Aren't we going on location somewhere at some point?
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
we got to go downtown.
Yeah, maybe for the first. Yeah, maybe that'll be what? That'll be in the middle of the summer. So maybe we can go on location up in Allentown. I like that.
Well, this is episode 29. So you want to next week is episode 30. Unless we're going to skip like 8 weeks, but
yeah, okay, maybe the 35th. Yeah, all right. Well, okay. All right, we'll just keep cruising. But we do want we got to do that.
Yeah.
This summer, we got to go online, up in
on location,
in Allentown, and just
man on the street,
maybe out in the park. We can set up in the park. As a matter of fact, we're going to be doing an outreach out in the park, 22nd.
We'll have to see about our internet connection availability.
That's right. So we may have to do it on the sidewalk.
You have to have internet to stream.
That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I could run a cord from somebody's. That's how we do stuff in the city. Yeah. Yo, you got an extension cord? All right. Here we go.
All right. Today, hey, we're back. It was my fault that we missed last week's podcast.
Wait, could you just say that again slowly?
It was my fault.
Oh, wow. Oh, man, that just feels so liberating.
Going through a very serious health
Times are changing, folks.
Very serious heart procedure.
No, that's right. No, that's right. You got the oblation, right?
Oblation.
Okay.
Yes. So I made it through that fine. I
Good.
actually went for a run for the first time.
Oh, get out of here! Really?
I did. Yeah.
So what happened?
I ran.
Did the heart stay in?
It stayed in rhythm. Yeah.
Now that would have been something that would have triggered.
Maybe not. Usually my jogs in the morning didn't. It's usually when I
playing soccer, running.
Yeah, okay. Running really like run real fast and then slow
stop.
down and then run and slow, and then it would freak out.
Okay. All right.
The doctor said he thought he thinks he figured it out and he fixed it, so I'm feeling good.
Okay.
And glad to have that behind me. So
yeah, awesome. Praise God for medicine and technology, man. It's amazing.
So today, where are we going today, Ron?
I don't know. You wanted to talk about CRXs.
Or CRXs? What are you talking about?
I have a CRX. CRV.
Oh, your Honda. Your Honda CRV?
Oh, no. You want to talk about the other CR. The CRT. Critical race theory.
Yeah.
All right.
We kind of have danced around the idea of critical race theory off and on.
Yeah.
We haven't actually taken time to delve into it. And I think even back last year when we started the podcast last summer.
Wow.
I think we kind of mentioned it a couple times. I think we may have alluded to it. What's been interesting is in the past year since we really started this podcast, most people, if you would have asked them, hey, what is critical race theory? I think most people at that point would have probably said, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't heard of it. I'm not really familiar with that. A year later, you ask people, hey, tell me what you think about critical race theory. And I would imagine that just about everybody in the United States has come in contact at least with that name,
The name
that
of it,
idea,
yeah.
have heard about it,
Yeah.
and is aware of that theory, that philosophy, that even worldview
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about. Now, I don't know that everybody understands completely what it is,
Yeah.
and where it comes from and what it means, and so we're gonna delve into it a little bit today. But not going to delve into it at extreme detail,
Sure,
right? Like, I'm
yeah.
not going to take a half an hour and walk you through all of the history of critical race theory, but it does have its roots in events and in history
Mhm.
that are important,
Absolutely.
and
yeah.
so we have to wrestle with it. And so, critical race theory is a very polarizing topic
Yeah.
in our culture, and I would say just even in the past 6 months, it's come to the surface because you're seeing this theory that is now being talked about, like on the news, in the media, on cable news networks,
It's
in
all over.
podcasts.
It's going to be taught in schools.
Well, and that's the big thing, right?
It's going to be. I think it's going to hit schools and become part of a regular curriculum at some point. But
that they're wanting it to go into schools, and they're trying to get into schools. And so then you have certain governors, and Ron DeSantis in Florida is probably the main one that says we will not, and sign the orders, we will not allow critical race theory to be taught in our schools,
Yeah.
and then make statements like we will not teach our children to hate America and to hate each other.
Right.
And those are pretty bold statements because he hasn't actually described critical race theory. All he's described is, hey, this is what is the result of critical race theory.
Yeah.
It teaches you to hate one another, and it teaches you to hate our country. And you might listen to that, and you might be a big Ron DeSantis supporter and say, yeah, we don't want that. Get that out of here. But do you really know what critical race theory
Right.
is? And why is Ron DeSantis even saying that? And is,
Yeah.
is it fair for Ron DeSantis to say that, that's what critical race theory produces? People that hate the United States and people that hate one another. Or is critical race theory something that can be utilized in some fashion to help us understand what's going on and help us understand the history of race relations and things like that? Is it something that, yes, it's in secular thought, but we as Christians in the evangelical church, we can kind of pull it off the shelf, utilize aspects of it to help us understand some things a little better, then put it back on the shelf and go back to the Bible, right? And so you're seeing both. You're seeing this polarized kind of reaction to it, and it's either evil, horrible, it will never be taught, or no, I think there's some good things here, and we can learn from it, and we can help understand race relations and how I as a white American and you as a black American, and critical race theory helps us kind of put that together and understand the context of our history and our past. So let's get into it a little bit. And and I guess my goal at the end of this podcast is to be able to say, hey, here's kind of what it is in a nutshell, and here's what we feel the Christian response should be to it.
Yeah.
And what place does it have in our understanding of our relationships with one another, looking at it through the lens of the gospel, right?
Yeah.
So we want to look at we want to look at everything we do through the lens of the gospel. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
And so the question we're going to ask at the end is the gospel enough, right? Or do we need something like critical race theory to help us further understand? So I guess where I will start with you, Ron,
Oh man. Okay.
is just give me your kind of interaction with critical race theory, your background with it, your kind of understanding of it as you've kind of encountered it in your ministry and in your life.
Okay. Well, I mean, critical race theory, it's not something that's new. Number one.
Absolutely true. I agree with that, and I think that's important. It is nothing new.
It's hit the surface now in light of what's happening in our culture with the police, Floyd, with the shootings. I mean, it's raising to the surface.
Trayvon
now.
Martin was a big instigator of kind of bringing this.
But it's not a new concept at all.
You want to turn that on
yeah,
That was Ron's phone going
Yeah,
on.
yes, that's my phone. Yes.
Not mine. It wasn't
It's
mine.
my prayer time. It's
Oh,
time,
is
but
that what that
we're
is?
doing a podcast right now, so but no, it's you go back, and I don't know the exact time where it kind of formulated, but you go back to the early '70s with all the things that were going on, the civil rights movement, and you take civil rights activists and leaders who kind of created this really in academics, this concept of critical race theory, and how do we look at where the law intersects with race and it's producing things that are unjust. Like that's a real broad nutshell definition of it, right?
Okay.
Let's look at the law. Let's see where the law is systematically, and that's a key word you'll hear, systematically creating less opportunity, marginalizing people on the basis of race,
Okay.
right? And so looking at where the law intersects with race, and it creates all of the injustice, social injustice, things of that nature. So it's not a new concept. It's something that people have been talking about forever.
In fact,
at least since the '70s, and probably even before.
well, yeah,
But-
and on that note, in fact, the term critical theory was coined in 1937.
Yeah, as
so
saying,
you're going back to the
even
30s.
way back before the
Right,
'70s, right?
And the term critical theory, which gave way to critical race theory, so this
Right.
idea of critical theory really was used to describe the work of what they call the Frankfurt School in Germany, which came out of the Institute for Social Research. And if you know anything about Marxist ideologies, and by the way, people immediately want to, when you say critical race theory, they either want to go one of two directions. Oh, complete Marxist ideology,
Right,
reject
right,
it, or
right.
or no, that's not Marxist at all.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
and so yet critical theory has its roots kind of in Marxist ideology. Because so Karl Marx basically looked at capitalism from an economic standpoint
Yeah.
and said capitalism by its very nature will and must fail.
Right. Right.
Because his view was that capitalistic structures were based purely upon those in power wielding that power and oppressing those underneath
Those
them
underneath,
to gain
right.
more wealth
The
and
lower
power.
class,
Right?
Right. You're right. They'll never have a chance to succeed and rise up the ladder.
Yep. And so Marx, in his ideology, he said capitalism will fail. It cannot succeed because it's based upon oppression. It's based upon power, and those in power oppressing those without power, and using those without power to gain more wealth, to gain more power. And he looked at it as evil. Now, that's important because if you want to get any insight into some of the ideologies of some of the movements like Black Lives Matter and things like that, they have their ideas rooted in this kind of Marxist ideology, whether they know it or not.
And I think that's the key right there, whether they know it or not, because a lot of people don't see the connection, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point.
And so the more you kind of delve into what Marx was trying to do or trying to even assess, what happened is capitalism didn't fail. Right? And so Marx and the Marxists were trying to understand and explain how culture, particularly Western culture, descended into a world of oppression and inequality. Like, according to Marx, capitalism should have failed, but it didn't. And all of a sudden we see this world, this free capitalistic market in the Western world, the United States and other countries, but particularly the United States. And the Marxist ideas say the United States and the capitalism is ultimately a system of oppression which produces inequality. And this is why people say, well, the critical theory teaches people to hate the United States because the United States was built upon capitalism. Critical theory says, well, capitalism shouldn't have worked, but it did. And so what happens is from critical theory came this, and they had to explain
Why?
right?
Right.
Why,
You have to- yeah.
why did we now end up with this country that is built upon oppression and inequality? And from that came the explanation, which is critical race theory.
Critical race theory. Right.
Oh, because
Yeah.
of slavery, because of white supremacy, because of all of those things in place from the foundation of our country.
But and here's the thing that's ironic about this. And again, this is such a huge topic. When you look at some of the people like Frederick Douglass, Dr. Martin Luther King, it's interesting how when they talked about injustice and how that needs to be eradicated, in their writings, they referred back to the founding fathers. It's interesting they never called the founding fathers white supremacists. But they referred back to the Judeo-Christian beliefs that the founding white fathers had in agreement with what they were saying when it came to freedom, man being created with rights, and so again, when we have this conversation, and I think so, it is a polarizing conversation, but we have to just exhale the emotion and say, well, wait a minute. If you have two of the most prominent people when it comes to civil rights and trying to find social justice, King and Douglass, in their writings appealing to the founding fathers, that what we're fighting for is what even the founding fathers said ought to be. And it kind of pokes holes a little bit in the every person who's white is a white supremacist. Now that's just one piece of the puzzle, but there's many observations like that we need to make.
When you hear the Martin Luthers and the Frederick Douglasses, they don't sound like the modern social justice warriors of today.
No, they don't. They don't.
And so what's different is what you are hearing is at its roots Marxist ideologies. This is why they say the system, critical race theory says the system is inherently racist.
Well, right. The system
it's
found very foundation.
Yep.
Right.
From its beginning, it was racist. It was built upon racist, oppressive ideologies, which produced massive inequality.
Yep.
Therefore, the entire system, because it is racist,
Yes.
and favors the white man over the black man,
Right. White supremacy.
must be completely dismantled,
Destroyed and rebuilt.
and rebuilt with something new.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
That was, and that is Marxist ideology. Now, you can talk in terms of economic, socialism and Marxism, and that isn't even necessarily a biblical theological conversation.
Right.
But I think it's important to note that critical race theory does have its roots in Marxist ideologies. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not, it is rooted in
Well, just go
those
back
ideologies.
and study Marxism.
Yep.
Right? Just, again, this is where, don't listen to sound bites. And this is part of the problem in our culture, our current culture right now. People are listening to 30, 40-second sound bites and running with that, and that becomes the totality of what they understand of that subject.
Yep. And so critical race theory questions the foundations of the established orders and structures that we have
Absolutely.
today.
Right.
It questions those.
Right.
And I think it's important to note that what happens is, and they make the point that the founding fathers themselves were slave owners and racists.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the ideas of the documents like the Constitution and the founding documents of our country that laid the foundation for our country are also racist.
Yep.
And contain white supremacy.
Guilty by association.
So you have to start up and say, is the United States Constitution and are the foundations that the founding fathers laid good and profitable for the country and for all people, like equal justice for all under law, right? They wrote that into our Constitution, right?
Mm-hmm.
But very few of them actually lived up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very difficult for a lot of people to understand. How could they understand and write, yes, equal justice under law for all, and then own slaves?
Right. Right.
Because those slaves didn't have equal justice
No,
under law.
not at all. Not at all.
And so they had the idea,
Yeah.
which was good and right, but that doesn't mean they lived up to even their own ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I think they say, well, we throw out the baby with the bathwater then. Because these guys were racist slave owners, everything they wrote and did must also be tainted by their white supremacy and their racism.
Right. And see, that's where I think we have to be careful. So now we start broad stroking things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start hearing things like white supremacy. You are a racist even if you don't realize it,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to repent of your whiteness and the privilege that it has gotten you and your forefathers. And all of a sudden we start broad stroking this because of going back and looking at real racism, real country founding things that were done that were wrong. And because this was at the hands of white men, therefore, anything they touch, anything they constructed is systemically wrong.
Yep. Yep.
Now, all I'm saying is we have to acknowledge those things that are wrong, absolutely. But if you apply that same logic to any other construct in our society, would we really allow that? Take that same that same logic and apply it to any other construct. Let's take the guy who runs his pizza shop, and this is a silly example. I'm trying to make a point. He runs his pizza shop, and you find out that this guy's been embezzling money the whole time he owned that shop. Matter of fact, he built that shop with embezzled money. Does that now mean that every single pizza shop, right, is in its very nature the same as that one? And that's what I see happening.
Or I'll give you an even better illustration because it happens all the time. Pastors of churches get up every Sunday and they preach, right? And they preach against sexual immorality. And
Yep.
they preach against husbands being faithful to their wives. Come to find out the whole time he was preaching that, he's been having an affair and
Yep.
he's been unfaithful to his
Yep.
wife.
Absolutely.
Does that make what he was saying and what he did in his
False.
ministry false and wrong?
No, it doesn't make it false. It makes it, what he was saying was right. How many times have you and I preached the truth? Right? And then we go out and do the very thing that
We preached against.
preach against. How many? Romans 7 comes to mind, right? The very thing I know I should do, Paul said I'd do the opposite.
Yep.
But see, we have a theological answer for that, not a social construct answer for that.
Right.
It's called sin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So within the critical race theory was born out of a desire to explain how capitalism succeeded. And so obviously the only reason capitalism succeeded was because those that were white, colonials from Europe, oppressed the black African slaves. That's the only reason that the American experiment would work, is because of the fact that it was built upon slavery and white supremacy. And so that's really where the critical race theory came out of, an effort to try to explain that. And so when you look at, well, let me ask you this. Do we have issues of oppression and inequality in the United States, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So no one's arguing that
No.
there's inequality.
Absolutely.
Okay. One of the issues of critical race theory is it looks at the economic and social disparities and says automatically, if there's an economic or social disparity,
Yeah, there's a race problem.
it automatically is because of a
And
race.
that's the broad stroking
Right.
that I'm talking about. Automatically. We're not going to look at the fact that maybe I'm sitting on my couch 20 hours a day gaming. We're not going to look at the fact that maybe I'm not getting up working. We're not going to look. Listen, I talked to a white business owner. And he came to me one day and he said, yeah, I want to run something by you. I just want to. And I said, yeah, sure, man. He said, he had a black employee who he had to let go. He had to fire. And he said, I just have a feeling with all what's going on, I'm going to get pushback.
Okay.
I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Would you have fired a white employee for the same reasons? He said, absolutely. See?
Yeah. He
But
proved
no.
by that he's not racist.
He proved by it that he's not racist.
If he would have kept him on just because he is black, that would have been racist.
Right? So he comes in 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late, doesn't show up at all. But see, and here's what's so sad about where I see our country going now. Those facts aren't good enough because he's black and you're a white business owner and you fired him. It's solely a race issue.
So critical race theory says yes, yes, because we always ask, and I wrote this down, do the facts matter, right? When a
Man.
a white police officer kills a black man, do the facts matter? According to critical race theory, they do not. This is why white people get so frustrated and confused whenever a black man is shot by a white police officer. A lot of white people want to say, okay, well, let's stop rushing to conclusions, right? I saw this happen when the man shot up the massage parlors, right? Everybody ran
Yeah.
to. He did that because of Asian hate, right?
Right,
Asian
right,
hate, and
right.
everybody was posting. I stand with my Asian brothers. I can't
Yep.
imagine what it's like
Yep.
to be Asian and be afraid
Yep.
for your life walking down the streets.
It becomes all about race.
Right. And so clearly what he did was motivated by race. Now come out and say he came out and told us, well, it had nothing to do with race, it had everything to do with this weird kind of idea of
Yeah.
his sexual addiction that he had. And
Yeah.
he looked at that as the source of his sexual addiction.
Right.
So in his own twisted way, that was him
Right.
dealing with his sexual addiction. And he came out and said that.
Yep.
Not to mention that everyone he shot was Asian.
Right.
Okay, but it didn't fit the narrative of critical race theory. So
Right.
critical race, and this is why if you get frustrated as a white person because, they're not looking at the facts. He was reaching in to grab, something, or he had a gun in his hand, or he had a knife, and she was about to stab somebody. Like, you guys aren't looking at the facts of the case. What you need to understand is, according to critical race theory, the facts don't matter.
Race matters.
Race matters.
Right.
It was a white cop, a black person.
So guilty.
That's all that matters.
So he's guilty.
Right.
Because it's part of the white supremacy, the systemic racism that this country
Right.
was founded on.
So black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by a cop than white men. That's all you need to know. That's it. So obviously we have a problem in our country.
So what is that going to breed? What and I teach at a high school, man, and I keep challenging my students. Boy, like, you guys are the ones who have the ability to change the current climate. But you're not going to change the current climate if you first don't become critical thinkers. If you don't exhale, put your emotion aside, look at the facts, ask good questions, find out the why behind the story. And what's happening, what I see in our culture now, if you try to have this dialogue, it's like, no, guys, you can wrap this up, put these mics away. Look, he was white, he was black, white man guilty, black guy innocent. That's how far we go. Like, what is that saying for me to do? Don't look at the facts. Don't look at the facts. We, as the culture, we will tell you how to think about this. So my critical race theory says, this is the solution. This is how you think, and you don't question it.
And the facts
wow,
don't-
that sounds
yeah.
a little oppressive to me.
Well, yeah, right. And well, and the facts don't matter because the system is inherently racist.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter that
Right.
he was holding a gun or she had a knife in her
Yep.
hand.
Yep.
It doesn't matter because the system is racist. And so critical race theory sees you and identifies people primarily by race.
Right.
And so you mentioned Luther. What's one of Martin Luther's famous sayings? Judge not people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That runs directly opposite to critical race theory.
Right.
Critical race theory says, no, we see people, first of all, as ethnic identity,
Right.
and we classify them first and foremost as an ethnic identity marker, right? So
Yeah.
black, white,
Yep.
Asian, brown, whatever.
Yep.
And so your identity is your race.
Yeah. And now we have to look at what has happened to your race historically.
And so, yeah, right. And so if your identity is your race, then you automatically fall into one of two categories: oppressor
Yep.
or oppressed.
Yep. That's right. That's right. And now we can look at the degree to which that oppression has happened. Because it's not just, again,
You, by nature of the color of your skin, Ron, are oppressed.
Right.
I, by nature of the color of my skin, this is critical race theory,
Are
are
privileged.
privileged and an oppressor. And I've participated in a system of oppression,
Right.
whether I know it or not, and I have contributed to the oppression of you and your people.
Yeah.
That's what critical race theory ultimately
Absolutely
forces you to
Now,
conclude.
ironically, when I came in this building today, I saw a brand new car sitting out front that I understand is
It's a 2017. It's 4 years old.
but I digress.
I'll let you drive it whenever you want.
No, but that's it, right? And so it becomes this very narrow way of looking at people, which again, if you actually look at that, to me, that's degrading. That the culture defines for me who I am solely based on the color of my skin. To me, that's a little degrading. It's like, wait, there's more to me than the color of my skin.
There is the content of your character, right?
I would think so.
And there is, and now we get biblical, there is how God defines you.
Yes, absolutely. Not how the culture defines me.
Yep.
Race is part of who I am, but race doesn't define who I am. It's not the totality of who I am.
So, and the reason, listen, every single culture throughout all of history has always had issues of oppression and inequality.
Yes.
Why is that?
Sin.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's the easy answer.
So really,
because of sin.
you can just put all your pens down, authors, and you're trying to figure
so-
it out. We just wrote
right,
the book.
yeah.
Sin.
And so, and the Bible clearly teaches that. And so, what happens is, well, that's not good enough. We're going to fix it.
Yeah.
We're going to fix oppression and inequality.
Yeah.
Well, Marxism is the way to do it. Get rid of capitalism, socialist Marxism.
Yeah.
No. Actually, we'll fix inequality through capitalism. So you
Right.
go on the other side and say,
Right.
no, capitalism will deal with inequality
Yeah.
because capitalism will give everybody the same opportunity and everybody will rise to capitalism.
Yeah.
And we can see the errors and the issues of capitalism and the greed that capitalism
Absolutely.
produced,
It can
right?
yes.
And
because
so-
of sin, though.
Yes,
It's
no
because
matter
of
what
sin.
system you
I
put
don't
in
care what-
place.
there
Yeah.
it is. I don't care what system you put in place. The Christian response to this is to look at it the way God says. I tell the kids all the time, the only commentary on life that is real is God's.
Yeah.
Man is sin, man is depraved, and it will come out through whatever system you. So you mean to tell me? So let's have a socialistic society, and everybody's going to treat everybody fair now?
Okay, so let's talk about this because there's an interesting distinction I think that's really important for us to understand. There's two words that you're going to hear in the culture: equality
Yep.
and equity.
Yep.
Do you know the difference between the two when they talk?
Well, you tell me what.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So equality means equality of opportunity, which I think we would all agree with. I think that's what Martin Luther, Frederick
Everybody
Douglass,
should have equal
opportunity, because they didn't in this country.
No, they
and,
did
and
not.
we all know that.
I couldn't even fill an application out if I was growing up back then.
Right.
No, we're not hiring any
And so,
blacks.
and so I get, I want to be careful with how I say that. I can imagine and I can try to understand kind of maybe the anger or the bitterness of some of the old black men who, listen, we sat around the table with in Philadelphia and talked with some of these old timers who were marginalized and who
serious
saw
oppression.
some serious oppression,
Absolutely.
and were not allowed in certain places and weren't
Right.
allowed to go to certain restaurants or get your food
Yeah,
at the back.
black and
or-
white
yeah.
bathrooms
Like
and all of that.
they lived that,
Yeah,
right? And as a
absolutely.
result, you can see just the pain
Yeah.
in their and that does something to you, right? Like when you see just the pain that these guys went through of being treated less than human.
Yeah.
Like if you've never sat down with someone that lived through that, as a white person, I would say you just need to listen and
Listen
hear
to their story,
and
man.
listen to their pain.
Yeah.
And but with that, there is still a lot of bitterness and anger that
Yep.
you hear too.
Absolutely.
That you can tell they don't want to let go of, or it's very hard for them to let go of.
Yeah.
For the younger generation, I've noticed younger generation guys who will say, well, I think the older guys are making too much out of this. Now, they didn't live through what these older
They
guys
didn't go
lived
through
through.
it. You got it. Yep.
Right? And so what Martin Luther, Frederick Douglass, these guys were fighting for was equality, right? Because they did not have equality.
Right.
And so we would give a resounding yes, equality is what we want. Equality of opportunity. when they use the word equity, do not confuse, and this is important, do not confuse equity with equality. When they talk about equity, they're not talking about equality of opportunity. They're talking about equality of outcome,
Yep.
right? That in the end, everybody needs to have the exact same outcome.
Socialism,
Right?
right?
And so when you hear that word equity, that's exactly what they're talking about. And so...
So if you have a 2017
Uh-huh.
car, I should have a 2017 car.
Or maybe I should have a 2012 car and you should have a 2012 car.
Exactly.
Right.
But it's going to be the same.
But yeah, it's going to be
Across
the
the
same.
board.
Right.
Right.
And so I can't have the Bose stereo system if you can't have the Bose stereo
Right.
system.
Right.
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 I hear a lot of people saying, well, no, I worked for that. I worked hard for that. I should be able to
Yep.
glean. Yeah. I'll give you that you worked hard for that. But you worked hard for that and got it as a part of a system that as you
Yep.
as you rose, you pushed this guy down.
Yep. So now we're going to take from you and equal it.
Right. I never
Equal it out.
understood what black people would say when they would talk about the man. Right, the man.
You don't
keeping
know
it
about
down.
the man?
Well, I do. I think I have a clear understanding. But that always confused me. Younger in life. Like,
Who's this man?
Who is this guy? And he sounds horrible. Yeah, like we ought to do something about this guy.
Oh, the man up on the hill.
And ultimately, what they are referring to is the system, right?
The system. Right.
Yeah, and
the system.
And so nobody's taken away from the fact that these guys, men and women, suffered under a system that was oppressive.
Yep.
That did not provide equal opportunity
Right.
under law.
Right.
And yet, the result of men like Martin Luther King, and the work that they did and the civil rights, would you, sitting here in 2021, say that even though it's not a perfect system, and we never will have a perfect system, by the way.
Because you have sinners. It's a better system. It's a better. Listen, if there is more opportunity in 2021, probably than Douglas or King ever dreamed of.
Would you say that most of because you and I have both been to Africa and we've seen how most people in Africa live. Would you say that most black people living in the United States have a level of privilege that people that live in the continent of Africa don't have?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Okay, explain why.
But just for opportunity-wise,
Okay.
education-wise, economic-wise. If there is someone who wants to start their own business, if there's someone who wants to further their education right now in Black America, what's stopping you from doing it? What college is not going to let you in?
Because of the color of your skin.
Because of the color of your skin, right?
Yeah, I would hope none.
I mean, so again, it's we're looking at the ills of the past, which were sinful, and there are still sinful things presently. But it's almost like sometimes when I hear people talk, it's like nothing has changed. Like absolutely nothing has changed.
And that's the concern, right?
Yes, yeah, because it's creating this false dichotomy.
But critical race theory, if adopted, says it won't change until you dismantle the current systemically racist systems that exist.
Right.
So I think that's why they say nothing's changed. They say nothing can change because the system itself is racist.
So then what? So here's what we need to do. You need to look at where black people were 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and look at where Black America is today. Look at where minorities are today. Look at the facts. You say, well, yeah, but if you look at the stats, whites are still here and blacks are still here, right? Economically, educational-wise, post-secondary degrees, yeah. Okay, so therefore what? Well, you see, the system is still in place. Is the system still in place? Is that what literally, like, what's stopping this black man from getting his degree? Because he can't go to college? Because he won't be admitted? Like, well, no. Well, then why didn't he get it?
Because he can't get out of the neighborhood that
He
he's
can't
in.
get out of the neighborhood, right? And so I think what we're doing, we're confusing
And the reason he's in that neighborhood is because of redlining.
Right. So we're looking at the fallout, right, of things that have happened in our society, happened historically. Absolutely. Right? Redlining. Why are most blacks in the urban context and not in suburbs? Yeah, there was a real thing called redlining. So yes, generationally, you're going to have more blacks living here and more whites in the suburbs. Go look at the housing laws. That's a real basis or racist thing that was in place until it got changed.
Would you say that black people, say in the urban centers, are still suffering the effects of what was a systemically racist system?
In some ways, yes.
Okay.
But it depends on what the issue is we're talking
That's
about.
a good point.
Right? So if since the 30s and the 40s, mainly the 30s and the 40s, blacks were not allowed, would not be given loans. That's fact. Go look at your history.
Yep.
Do not give Negroes loans in these areas. And there's a map that the bankers looked at and said, nope, that's suburbs. We're not going to give you a loan. Okay. Well, then those black families, they go into this inner cities and they have families and they have families. And so what? That's where they stay. Here's my question. How does even that, though, cause that black man to become a drug dealer? How does that then cause that black man to put a gun in the face of another black man? See, now when I start talking like that, all of a sudden, oh, you don't understand. No. I do understand. I I was raised in the inner city.
Yep.
And it's something my dad used to say all the time. He would say, tell me what that black man who put his gun in the chest of another black man, tell me why he did that. White supremacy? This is my dad talking now. Who grew up,
Who lived
in
through
the South
segregation,
and grew up
yeah.
through segregation.
Yeah.
Because you would think this, if we all get denied privilege because of the color of our skin, and so we all walk away with our heads down and go back into our communities, wouldn't you think we would work together?
Yeah.
Say, yo, bro, that's okay. They look at us that way. We know that we're better than that. Let's work together. Let's prove them wrong. Yeah. But rather you have fighting and violence and black on black crime. Are we going to blame that on white supremacy too? See, that's where I lose my patience in this conversation. And what I say is when you start talking that way, well, that's because of the white supremacy. You are now belittling that black man as a human being because you're saying he can't think for himself. You're telling me that he's been twisted in his mind by the white man to shoot another black person? Really? And so this whole thing gets perpetuated as here's what we need to have happen. Dismantle the system. Dismantle the system, and you're telling me all the black on black crime is going to go down? Yeah. You're telling me that people are going to now stay in school? Yeah, we can argue the school and the sub-marginal education. That stuff is there.
Ultimately,
that stuff is real.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to create this utopian society without oppression, without inequality, without murder, violence against one another. We're trying to create this in a purely humanistic, secular
Absolutely.
way. And
in
fact, we're saying, God, no, thank you. We got this.
We got this.
And we keep killing and murdering one another.
Absolutely. So, like
and
you
oppressing
said,
one another.
What you said before, no system is ever going to take care of the issue. So does that mean we don't do it? Now, of course we do things. Of course we try to change where we see injustices. Absolutely.
Yep.
But if we don't look at this from a theological standpoint, that's where the real change comes, from a theological standpoint.
Yep.
Recognizing that when that black man shoots another black man, I can't look at him and say, well, you did that because of white supremacy. I need to say that's a matter of your heart, man, of what's going on in your life. Now, they may blame that. Well, what am I supposed to do? I can't get a job, so I had to go out and rob my brother. And that's the white man's fault. That is a dangerous way of thinking. One, it's untrue. Two, the person belittles himself as a human being because now they're saying they can't think and make choices for themselves, that they have to make these life-destroying choices.
So what I will say, and this will segue into next week, because we've talked critical race theory, our kind of topic that of our podcast right now is critical race theory and the gospel. So we've talked some critical race theory here. What we haven't talked is, okay, what about the gospel? What about those who say, okay, well, you can with critical race theory, eat the cherry and spit out the seed, right? Just take the good from it. Is there some good, helpful things with critical race theory? Or is critical race theory a blatant attack on the authority of Scripture that really ultimately produces an unbiblical soteriology and an unbiblical martyrology, ecclesiology, and eschatology.
Yeah.
And so that's where we want to go. So
Yeah,
we want to
absolutely.
go into the theological implications of this. But I think it's helpful just to understand that here's kind of the roots of critical race theory. Here's what it produces. Here's kind of what it looks like. Here's why people are saying it is dangerous, because it primarily classifies you as a white oppressor or a black oppressed. Therefore, children who are friends with one another, if you automatically say, hey, you're in this classification, Ron and Doug, you're in this classification. And so all of a sudden, little Ron's like, really? Yeah, he's using his white supremacy to, oh man.
Yep.
And
Give
all
me
of a
my
sudden-
ball back.
Yeah. All of a sudden, it drives a wedge
It does drive a wedge.
where the wedge wasn't.
because those aren't classifications
Yeah.
that Scripture uses.
And until Doug recognizes his white supremacy and denounces it and divests from his whiteness, you can never really have a relationship.
Right.
And I don't know that critical race theory actually ever opens the door for a relationship between races.
Right. Right.
I don't see reconciliation there. And I know even in the church, the church has adopted this term called racial reconciliation.
Yes.
I want to talk about that
Yeah.
because that's a big buzzword in American evangelical churches, and
Absolutely.
it sounds really good, and
Yep.
maybe it is good. I want to talk about
Yeah.
it because there's a lot of programs and efforts out there to promote racial reconciliation.
How about we talk about spiritual reconciliation?
Right.
Starting with God first.
And what is racial reconciliation? And so we'll probably spend at least a couple more podcasts kind of talking through the theological implications of all of this.
Absolutely.
So if you're watching, don't forget, if you have a question, we'll try and track your questions and answer those as we go. Don't be afraid to email in or put on the message board, either on Facebook or YouTube, the question you have, and we'll delve into it, because I know that this is it's a touchy topic, but we want to be clear with it, and we don't want to dance around it. We want to tackle
absolutely.
it head on.
And look at it through the lens of Scripture.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's where we really want to go
Now,
next week.
With that being said, can I have your mug? All right, guys. We'll see you.
All right. Have a good week. We'll see you.